So before we do any presentation at Royal Roads, we always acknowledge that we live, learn, and work on the traditional lands of the Kosepsum and the Kwangin ancestors and families. And learning has actually been happening here for countless generations, and we're so grateful to be on this land. I also want to take a minute just to acknowledge the situation that we're in. We were having a conversation before the webinar began, just around, of course, we're in month 7, I believe now, of our global health crisis and all of the inequity issues that have been highlighted throughout this, and of course all the political issues, and just we're in a very complex time, and Royal Roads is really about finding a way forward, and that's what these specializations are about. The tourism industry is changing right now, and it's really about us being innovative and adaptive, and that's what we are here to do at Royal Roads. And we are really excited today to be talking about our Master of Arts in Tourism Management, which is already a very unique degree, and our new specialization in social entrepreneurship, because this is one of 2 that have been released just of recently. The other one is in disaster and emergency management, which we will be having another webinar in a couple weeks, but today we will be exploring social entrepreneurship in the context of tourism management. So I am joined today by Dr. Eugene Thomlinson, who is both an associate professor and the director of the School of Tourism and Hospitality. Welcome, thank you. And we are also so lucky to have Lee Sentes here, who is an associate faculty who specializes in social entrepreneurship, who's going to be joining the conversation as well. So welcome, Lee.
Hi.
Thank you. I'm Alana McConaughey. I'm an education advisor at the university. I'm also a graduate and a current student, so very well versed in all things Royal Roads. And I'm also backed up here with a few other people that you can't see, or maybe they have their camera on. I can't see them right now. But I have my colleague, Christy, who is going to be backing me up on the technology end and just going to be in the chat box. We also have Nao Fujiwara, who is going to be answering questions in the chat box. We might have Tracy Summers on here. I haven't seen her yet, but it's possible she's here. She's an enrollment advisor as well, so watch out for them in the chat box. So now that you know who we are, we'd love to get a sense of who is in the room with us. So if you feel comfortable, just typing into the chat box where you're watching in from. I know some people already shared that, but it'd be great for people who are maybe just arriving. I see there's already Pradeep from Nepal, we have Dean from Vancouver, so just feel free to keep on typing and letting everybody know. It would be great just to kind of see the variety of people who are in the room. Of course, people who are interested in tourism are coming from all over the world, and as you type, I'll let you know what we're going to be up to. So we're going to do a super brief overview of the Royal Roads experience. As I mentioned in the emails, we're not going to be going through the specific information for the MATM. We're going to be doing a really high-level overview and how the specialization fits within the Master of Tourism Management. And then we're going to be going into a discussion with Eugene and Lee on the value of social entrepreneurship in the context of being a tourism professional. We will wrap up with the application process and requirements. So I'm just going to see who else is in the room. So we have Sharjana from Sri Lanka, we have Akash from Dubai, we have Maud from Vancouver, who is currently a Master of Arts in Tourism Management student. Welcome. And we have Joel from Kimberley. We have Bridget from Black Creek, Terry from Port Angeles, Washington. We have Ashish here from India. We have Katerina here from Moscow, and we have Jordan here from Mid-Vancouver Island, who's also an MATM student. So wonderful. Thank you so much for all of you for joining us today, and definitely representing a number of different countries. So just to give you a little bit of context, a few of you are going to be quite familiar with this land. I haven't personally seen it in a while. I haven't been to the campus in a number of months now, but I know it still exists. So Royal Roads University was created 25 years ago. We were created with a different type of mandate. So we're a public university with a government mandate to create programs for working professionals. So a number of things that we do are really focused on making sure that people have a really impactful experiential education. We're also a National Historic Site, so a wonderful place to study tourism. So Hatley Castle was built in the early 1900s and still stands and represents our president's office, actually. And then we have the Sherman Gen building, which is actually, it's such a great representation of Royal Roads, because the Sherman Gen building I believe it was the stables. Is that correct, Eugene?
That's correct. Yeah, it used to be the old stables.
Yes, so the stables for the castle, and they took this old structure and created this very modern, beautiful building. This is where the School of Tourism and Hospitality actually is. So it's really about merging, you know, something that is very historical and you know, was used for something else and creating something new with it. And that's, I think, a really beautiful metaphor for what Royal Roads tries to do. And we are also on Esquimalt Lagoon. So this is the view from the back of the castle. So very beautiful view back there. It also feeds into the ocean, so very close to the beach as well. And I also wanted to mention that we have been offering online learning for 25 years, which is something we're very proud of right now. So we have been able to, even our on-campus programs have been able to fairly easily pivot to an online model. And we do it in a way that's very much collaborative and about creating community. So you know, people who want to still have that sort of experience where they're getting to work with others, we do everything we can to make that feel as personalized as possible. And I also just wanted to make quick mention that we are a Ashoka Changemaker campus. So if you are interested in finding out more, I encourage you to look up the Ashoka You designation. This basically means that we are committed to bringing our learning outside of the classroom, so enabling people to have impact with their education out in the world. So I think, again, social entrepreneurship is something that really speaks to that, and I'm sure we'll get into the specifics of that a little bit more. And from there, I will let you take it away. We're going to dive into how this specialization works in the MATM program.
Thank you very much. Yeah, we'll go to the next slide then. So just to give you a very quick overview, again, Alana mentioned that I'm Eugene Thomlinson, the program, the school director, and I used to be the program head for the BA in Global Tourism Management. So I just kind of overview all of the things going on in the school. With the MATM, as Alana mentioned, it's quite an interesting specialization. Things in general for Royal Roads were very hands-on, very applied, with that nice combination of theory and application of the different ideas and things like that. And so right now we've got kind of 3 different options going through the program at this graduate level. There is the on-campus, well, eventually on-campus, when we're allowed to be back onto campus model with some online courses. There is a blended online model. And what happens with the blended model is that in general, you spend most of your time online working with all of your colleagues in that, but you will come to the campus for usually like a 1-week residency, kind of an intense week of working with your colleagues, with the different instructors in that, and working on usually 1 course while you're on campus. But it also gives you an opportunity to see everyone and to work on that project on a face-to-face sort of situation. As well, we do have these graduate certificates for either whether it be, you know, upskilling or retraining, or for some people, the graduate certificates are a way of just dipping your toe in the water of the MATM program. And quite often we will have people try out a graduate certificate after they've done their 3 courses. They decide, hey, you know, this MATM is for me, and they join the program on a full-time basis. Next slide. So for both the blended and the on-campus, you can see this is just a kind of an idea or a suggestion on some of the courses that you will take. You can see on the left-hand side, those 6 courses are ones that everybody takes. And then on the right-hand side, those are some of your options for different courses that you might do. So, for example, with the some of your options, you might be taking a look at hospitality, trends and issues, a bit of social entrepreneurship, which is what we're going to talk about today, finance, and there is even the opportunity for people to do an internship while they're in the program And again, especially if for those that might be kind of new into the industry or wanting to take that next stage and next step up, the internship can be that nice opening of the door into further opportunities and things like that. So this just gives you a little bit of a hint on what sort of courses you'll be taking in the program. As well, there are 3 different ways of completing the program, the full-time, either the blended or the on-campus program. You have a thesis route, and maybe many of you have heard of a thesis before, but it's quite an intense research project where you're looking at, and again, with Royal Roads, usually that nice combination of practical and theoretical. So combining some theories and ideas with taking a look at a real world project. It's worth 12 credits towards your final degree. And so you would take 12 credits and 2 elective courses plus those 6 core courses. The major research project is also another research possibility, again, combining the theory and the practical hands-on research, but it doesn't, unlike the thesis, it doesn't go to kind of an external review panel. So you're still doing a good, interesting research project, but it still gives you a little bit more freedom to take another elective course, and the expectations are a little bit less. Either route, however, can be used if you want to continue on towards a postgraduate degree, whether it's a doctorate in something else. So either one can provide those opportunities for you. Or for those of you who are not interested in driving your own research project, there's a capstone course that's worth 3 credits, and then you get to take 5 elective courses. So those are the 3 possibilities for you. And the top 2 are particularly important for our discussion today because as a part of doing the specializations, next slide, please. With the specializations, what you would do is you would take either the major research project or the thesis option. So you'll be doing your own research, your own primary research. And then you take 2 courses in that specialization, and that earns you the specializations that we're going to be talking about today. One of the ones in particular, the social entrepreneurship. So for January 2021, we will be introducing a social entrepreneurship specialization, which Lee and I are going to be talking about in just a moment. As well, there is a disaster and emergency management specialization, which we'll be talking about later on this month, I believe in about 2 weeks on a Thursday. So if you're interested in that, definitely please check back in with us and take a look at it, and we'll tell you a lot more about the disaster and emergency management specialization at that time. In the future, we do have a few other specializations that we are looking at, but just to give us a bit of time to get everything prepared and make sure that everyone has a fantastic experience, we wanted to just roll them out in time. So you can see some of them at the bottom. Which leads us to the topic of today between Lee and I. And to be honest, Lee is really the specialist in this sort of thing. So a lot of this talk, the discussion that Lee and I will have today, it's relying on the experience and the years of work that Lee has done. And hopefully just I'll help to guide the conversation along. As Alana mentioned, if you have any questions, if you can please just save them to the end, and we'll get to them at the end so that we can deal with them all at the same time. As well, it gives Lee and I an opportunity. Potentially, we might already have answered some of your questions. So we'll wait until the end to answer any questions that you've got. So I guess rolling right into it. Oh, did you want to say something, Alana?
I'm just going to let everyone know that I'm just going to bring down the slide decks for this part of the conversation. I'm going to bring it back up in a few minutes. But I was just thinking maybe Lee could give a bit of his background as an introduction of like what his background in social entrepreneurship might, that might be a really cool contextualization. So I'm going to pull it down now. There we go.
Right. Well, thanks, Eugene and Alana, and thanks for everyone else for coming from all over the world to actually be here for this session. It's really impressive to see where some of our students come from. It's so far flung. And my experience is also far flung, especially when it comes to social enterprise and working with nonprofits in particular. So I've had quite a bit of experience working internationally and doing international development projects. What's curious is that if I reflect back on some of those projects, you could actually think of them as social enterprise type projects. There's social entrepreneurship concepts are built into those projects. But you know, as is actually fitting for the whole concept of social entrepreneurship, I don't think I knew that that's what I was doing at that time. And it actually is, it's an endemic issue with social enterprise and social entrepreneurship that it's a little bit tricky to nail down with a definition. So I've worked in a number of different countries doing everything from setting up, say, for example, I guess I would call it like voluntourism and little enterprises for nonprofits, but also setting up, helping to set up small self-sustaining money generators for organizations that have continued now for about 20 years, which is pretty surprising. One of them being in Sri Lanka. So hello to the person from Sri Lanka. And that was dealing with solar cookers. So my wife and I went to Sri Lanka, helped not introduce, but set up something with a local nonprofit there. The idea being that the nonprofit would be able to build and sell these solar cookers. So not only are they doing some skills development with local folk, but they're also selling the solar cookers. And that income is rolling into the organization, helping it be sustainable without having it have to rely completely on the public purse. So, you know, in a little nutshell, that's kind of what social entrepreneurship is all about. You know, one thing you could do, you know, maybe not do it right now, but do it afterwards. You could do it right now. We can multitask. Go type in social entrepreneurship into a web search, and you'll see pretty quickly that there's a whole variety of definitions. And social enterprise, too, is a function of social entrepreneurship. But even there, it's hard to define where social enterprise starts and stops. It's actually easier to talk about the qualities of what social enterprise is and social entrepreneurship is. So I don't know, do you want me to launch into?
Yes, yeah. So I guess a couple of things is, what are these qualities, and how new is the concept of social entrepreneurship? Because you were saying you've been doing it for a while, but how long has the term actually been around for?
Yeah, I just doing a quick Google search this morning even, it seems to be something which started to take root in the 1980s. But that being said, you know, the concept of what we're talking about isn't new, right? Someone's just slapped a term on it, and we're all coming to grips with figuring out what that term means. And it's taking a surprising amount of time to actually figure out what that term means. But you know, it's an approach. It's more an approach than anything else, and that sort of embodies the qualities, right? So a social entrepreneur is someone that, you know, for the rest of us, maybe we kind of wander through life and we see a lot of, for example, at this time, social, environmental, health problems. You know, like there's all kinds of what have been termed wicked problems. No end to them. Really big, hairy, challenging problems. And what a social entrepreneur will do, and it doesn't, you know, that doesn't mean that they've gone and they're wearing the social entrepreneur hat. This can just be anyone wandering down the street and saying, you know what, where someone else is seeing a problem, I'm actually seeing an opportunity. If we took this and we put them together, we could actually solve some issues here. There's a really good example just locally here in Victoria. It's called the Imagine Studio Cafe. And, you know, they're doing, it's basically a cafe that does all the normal things that you would expect a cafe to do, but they're very intentional about who they hire. So they hire youth who otherwise would have a very difficult time actually gaining employment. And that might be because of physical disabilities. It might also be because maybe they've had, you know, circumstance in their life which has made them, in many other cases, unemployable. You know, usually like run-ins with the law or something, or maybe an addictions issue or something, which has made further employment actually quite difficult. And, you know, you can sort of see with some of these folk, if this opportunity didn't exist, you know, they could transition into their 20s and 30s and still not really have anything to go on their CV. So the Imagine Cafe intentionally hires these people with the idea that they're doing mentorship and skills development and skills building with those folk at the same time. So I'm still getting my cup of coffee, right? They're still running an enterprise which is profitable. You know, it's not a nonprofit. So the owners are still making some money off of it, but they're satisfying a social need at the same time. And I don't mean the social need of coffee. I mean the social need of the people that they're actually employing. So it's the way that you do things. And that's quite different from, say, maybe your local grocery store, who might use something that we would term corporate social responsibility, where maybe once a year they write a check to the local baseball, you know, little league baseball team, you know, $30,000, the little league baseball team, which is great. You know, that's fantastic. That's an organization that realizes it's part of a community and wants to support the community. But you could probably see that this is a grocery store and they're giving a check to the little league baseball. If I went to them and said, hey, instead of Little League Baseball, would you be willing to write your check to a community garden? They'd probably say, sure. Or would you be willing to write a check to support a local van that helps people with in wheelchairs move around? Sure, they're going to support that. So yes, there's a sense of corporate social responsibility there, but the same level of intentionality is missing. Right? So it's bolted on. And if, say, for example, one year they didn't write that check, it wouldn't change the nature of the grocery store. The grocery store would still be doing groceries. Whereas if we go back to the Inspire Cafe, if they suddenly decided to no longer hire those youth, the nature of the organization actually has changed. What's also equally... Yeah, sorry.
So does it kind of float into, I guess, the philosophy or the ideals that kind of run or manage the organization, rather than being, as you said, an add-on to it?
Yeah, I think that's a good way of putting it. And I think it speaks to the qualities of the social entrepreneur. So in the regular kind of private sector business world, we're interested in making profit, right? That's the way we consider value. We've made profit for our shareholders or the business owners, and we gauge the success of that business on the degree to which it has made profit. Within a social enterprise and a social entrepreneur running a social enterprise, the concepts of value are different. And, probably a lot of people have heard things like, the double or triple bottom line. Now we're talking about a quadruple bottom line of not just social and environmental, but also cultural bottom line that organizations can think about. And it's them recognizing that there's other ways to create value. There's other things to value, that your organization is doing more than just serving coffee. It's also doing these other things at the same time. It makes for a more complicated organization. I'm not going to lie to you about that, but it also makes for a much more rich experience. And it starts to potentially solve some of those challenges that we're, perennially facing. It's using what we know works very well, which is the private sector, organizational, business, profit-focused model. We've got them all over the place. There's millions of them. They're self-sustaining. They go for years, and they're generally successful. And it also mixes then that the social awareness and the social interest that comes from, say, the nonprofit world, and then tries to find a balance in the middle that counteracts or mitigates some of the negative impacts from both, right? So the negative impacts for the private sector is maybe the amount of garbage, let's say, for example, its environmental footprint, or the fact that maybe the profit motive means that they're willing to ship production to a different part of the world that has really bad labor codes, but it's cheap to produce whatever it is that they're producing. The nonprofit, the difficulties there is the constant need and reliance on the public purse, and the inability oftentimes to scale up and to get bigger in order to actually have impact. So a lot of nonprofits, I mean, there's a handful of really big nonprofits, but there's tons of really tiny ones that have limited impact because they can never quite get enough money. They're never really stable with the income that they're generating. So how can we mash those two, the benefits and the positive aspects of those two different sectors? How do we bring them together into some kind of a hybrid in order to mitigate the negative aspects of both, and therefore to come up with something new? And I think it's because of that coming up with something new, that hybridization, that's part of the challenge of why it's difficult to nail down exactly what is a social enterprise. How do I know when I'm looking at one, right? And there's just a lot of organizations that, there'll be a nonprofit, but they've also got maybe a little cafe on the side, or I want to say a value village, but not necessarily a value village, like an opportunity shop or something where they're selling used clothes. And they probably don't even recognize that there's aspects of what you're doing, which is actually a social enterprise. And with a bit more fine tuning, you could probably really come out and showcase yourself as that. The big benefit of that being is that it sets you apart from your competitors and your neighbors.
Now, earlier you mentioned about some of the qualities or aspects that make, whether it be a social entrepreneur or a social enterprise, what are some of those qualities that I guess that you look for, or to put it into the context of this specialization, that would be taught, that students learn about social enterprise?
Yeah, so the course that I help run, which is the TRMN 625, the social enterprise course, I think for me, the students really go on a big journey. It's a 9-week course, and it's busy. It's a busy course. It's a challenging course. And most students, when they come into that course, they've maybe heard the term social enterprise, but they don't really know what it is. And so what the students are learning from beginning to end, because they actually design a basic social enterprise. So they go through not quite a business plan, but they come up with like a business canvas. We work through the business canvas in order to get to a reasonably well thought out initial concept. of a social enterprise. And so the main skills that they're learning is it's almost unlearning that that 100% adherence to the concept of profit as a judgment of value and of success, and figuring out the complexity of, well, how do I get my head around valuing other things, such as valuing someone's future employability? Like, how do I even quantify that? How do I, like, what does that look like? Why should I be doing that? And what are some of the issues and challenges that come into trying to broaden my perspective of what constitutes value? And that is challenging. It sounds easy to say, and there's probably a bunch of people who are listening who are like, oh yeah, totally, I get it. You try and do it, and try and actually put it into a model where you can give a reasonable argument that this organization stands a chance of doing two things. One, staying financially sustainable, because the organization needs to keep running. If it doesn't run, it's not doing any good. And it needs to be able to also have some kind of social and environmental impact. And trying to hold the tension of those two things, that's where all the creativity comes into it. Because anyone can start a coffee shop, right? Anyone can start a hotel. This is not tricky pants stuff. You do your market research, you get a loan, you build the place. I mean, I'm simplifying it, sure, but the process is well worn. We know exactly how to do that. But to set up a hotel that also addresses a social or environmental issue, a local social or environmental issue, and does that meaningfully, not just with a few stickers in the shower saying use less water, or something really surface like that, but like a real deep impact. That's hard. And it means that you have to have an awareness of not just how to run that hotel, but also an awareness of, what are we talking about when we're talking about this social issue, right? So it's holding that tension in your head in order to do that. That's a real challenge. And there are some social enterprises that decide that it's too big of a challenge, and they actually separate those two entities so that the for-profit has its own board and its own structure, and it's very good at making money. And there's also a kind of a nonprofit element, which has its own board and knows how to address the social or environmental issues. And there's an agreement between the two. There's a way to move money from the for-profit to that nonprofit element, and there's a way to move the kind of the kudos or the positive awareness, or I don't know, the kind of good news stories from that nonprofit to the for-profit, and it's mutually beneficial. So again, there's many different models of social enterprise. So we learn a little bit about that too, in order to give students some options. There's lots of different options that are out there.
So why do you love it, Lee?
Yeah, good question. It's because it is challenging, right? It's hard. I co-owned a co-working space for a few years here in Victoria. It was called The Dock. It's still running, and it was set up as a social enterprise. And it was challenging to figure out, how do we hold in tension those two things: make a profit, have a positive impact. And what's really interesting there is the creativity that comes along with that, because there's no playbook, right? There's no recipe of how to do this. So it's a constant awareness of what you don't know, and having to then be open to constantly relearning and experimenting. So it's an ongoing running experiment. And I think that really attracts some people who like not just that challenge, but like that feeling of, I'm walking into new territory and I don't know what I'm going to find. And it's like getting to the next level in your video game, you know. It's like you're walking in there, it's like, I don't know what's going to jump out of the shadows at me, but I'm ready for it, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen. So it's just that, I think it's that creativity element is really exciting, and also the people that it attracts. I find them to be much more interesting than those people who are just focused on either writing funding proposals or just interested in figuring out how to maximize profit.
Very cool. So are you ready to answer a few questions from the people, the participants?
Sure, as best I can. Yeah, absolutely. I'll try. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'll just say that if you feel, however you want to communicate that feels most comfortable, if you want to type in, I see that Shana did type in about her already having launched one in Sri Lanka and there being numerous issues. You're welcome to, if you want to share a little bit about that and bring that into the conversation, that would be great. Or if people want to put their hand up and ask a question or type in, whatever is going to work the best.
So opening the floor. Any questions from anyone about social entrepreneurship, social enterprise, how to be a social entrepreneur?
Yes, please. I see Ganesh has asked if he can ask a question. Please unmute.
No, well, I think it's a good morning in Canada now. So it's a good morning to everyone up here. And
Morning.
yeah, morning, and very good morning to Professor Eugene and Lee and Ellen as well. So my question to Lee is like, how do you think the capitalistic market can be a leading role in the peripheral market in social enterprise, so that the social enterprise and the peripheral market can grow and flourish, and they don't have the dominant of the capitalistic market? As we know, like in context of tourism, many hoteliers, like you can say Hilton or someone, they invest in a country like in Sri Lanka or India or any example, for example, Bali, but the money is leaking out from the country. You know, like 45% of the money is leaking out from the country, and people are getting less money. And if the country doesn't have an agricultural standard, then the money is leaking out 70%. So how do you think how a capitalistic market can lead a role in such a bigger sphere and this tourism market?
Yeah, so hit me with an easy question. That's great. Holy cow. So, I mean, I'm not going to say that I'm some kind of economics expert by any stretch, right? So I think oftentimes, and I get a lot of students in the social entrepreneurship course who have worked with or are currently working with really big hotel chains, like what you're talking about. And what they express to me is that it's almost a lack of awareness. And I suppose in some ways it's maybe giving the organizations the benefit of the doubt that they haven't been convinced of the potential benefit of operating like this in order to experiment with some of these models. Of course, the best way to convince those organizations to do this is that if you have this positive social or environmental impact, it's going to raise your profile and therefore raise profits. Like, that's a very compelling argument, right? Of course, it doesn't necessarily address what you're talking about, because that could just be then more profits going offshore. I think what's interesting is that the consumer is actually the one where maybe they're a little bit ahead of where the organizations or the companies actually are. And so the consumers are looking for, the consumers value knowing that the money that they're spending at your hotel or your restaurant is doing more than just lining someone's pocket, right? That's a compelling argument to put in front of a consumer. And so if you're sitting there saying, I want to start a hotel in Sri Lanka, what is going to make me stand out from the crowd? What is going to make me be attractive to a consumer base, especially in a very crowded tourism market? And so it's saying, well, we know that a lot of consumers are interested in their dollar doing more than just lining someone's pocket. We know that consumers are interested in things like climate change, social justice. Sure, not every consumer, but sometimes the real benefit or the real secret to success is getting niche with your market and saying, we're going to be the hotel that not only gives you a fantastic experience along the south coast of Sri Lanka, but we're also going to be the hotel that works with maybe the local elephant sanctuary or the local turtle sanctuary, or something that does beach cleanup, or something that addresses issues
environmentally
related to social issues that are in that region. So it's that approach, and it might be that some of the big hotel chains, we need to drag them along, but I think the consumers are actually, or at least there's a niche group of consumers that are quite a few steps ahead of what those organizations are offering. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's it off the top of my head.
Well, no, it surely does, because you said if you want to open a business some point at a time, you have to make sure that your only goal should not be economically driven, but also social or environmental driven, because it can have a larger impact on in the planet, as a whole. So yes, it does. Well, thank you.
No problem.
Lee, there's a question from Terry that says, how do you quantify value of social enterprise? And I don't know if that kind of goes towards where you earlier made the comment that for a lot of capitalist businesses, it's all about profit, and that's how you gauge success. So are there similar, I guess, key performance indicators for social enterprises?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, definitely for a social enterprise, one of the key performance indicators, it's profit. Like, there's nothing that's saying that you can't make money with social enterprise. So, profit, especially as it relates to ongoing financial sustainability of the organization, it's important. So that's a key performance indicator. Now, the other ones, the social and environmental indicators, that's trickier, because it's really specific to whatever it is that organization is doing, right? So, for example, an organization like the Imagine Studio Cafe that hires youth that are otherwise hard to hire, the value may well be in asking the employees, what is it that you have gained from being part of this organization? What are the skills that you have picked up? How are you in a better place now than where you were at the beginning? And you could, if you wanted to, then almost watch what happens to that employee when they leave your establishment. And then you can make an argument of contribution. We have contributed to this person's ability to move into this next job. So you can establish your value in that sense. So you're, in a lot of respects, you're borrowing from how nonprofits would talk about the concept of value in their paradigm, in their concept, in their sector. That's the word I'm looking for. But it's really, really tied to whatever the social or environmental issues are that the organization wants to focus on. And this is part of the difficulty then with creating a one-size-fits-all model, right? Whereas with a for-profit model, it's really pretty basic in terms of what you're trying to do. You're trying to shift stuff to people and make money. That's kind of it. Whereas with the social enterprise, you're getting into less quantifiable or less easily quantifiable areas. And so the trick then is figuring out how do I describe this? How do I learn from the monitoring and evaluation techniques of the nonprofit realm in order to be able to put together an argument that says, you know, not only do we serve you a great cup of coffee, but your dollar helps, you know, our employees get great jobs in the future. You know, you're trying to make that kind of value statement to your potential customers as a way of standing out from all the other Starbucks and all the other cafes that are there. So does that answer your question?
Now, is there a danger though of that sort of, and ecotourism went through this, that sort of greenwashing where you're only doing it to stand out from the rest of the competition?
Absolutely, yeah. And it's funny, one of the very first things that that we tackle within the social enterprise or social entrepreneurship course is we look at Starbucks, and we say, Starbucks, is this a social enterprise or just a business? Because of course they've got a very, very in-your-face public campaign related to fair trade coffee, and you know they also are quite public about a lot of social issues. Whether they do that well all the time or not is of course debatable, but you know, everyone screws up at some point. But there's tons and tons of examples of greenwashing. And there's no doubt that that consumers are also getting a little bit skeptical in some respects when they see things that are branded as eco, you know, eco this, eco that. You know, it's like it's lost its impact because it's lost its meaning. Social enterprise has that same danger because it's hard to nail down. And so I don't have to, if I want to open a cafe and call it a social enterprise, I can. I don't necessarily have to do anything all that positive, aside from say, I buy fair trade beans. And so therefore I'm a social enterprise. While there are options of registering as a bona fide social enterprise model as a business, there actually aren't that many new businesses that choose to go down that road, just because it's quite an onerous process and onerous reporting. So you get this whole ecosystem of organizations that, I guess you say you're a social enterprise, but I need to go in and actually probe this a little bit in order to make sure that that's the case. And I think that's kind of where we're at the moment is, you know, we haven't come up with a snappy term like greenwashing for it, but it's holding that same problem of people saying that they're doing stuff that they aren't necessarily doing. And we haven't figured out a way to, how do we audit this, especially as a consumer walking in the door to a place? How do I know, you know, that this is true? It's tricky, and I mean, I don't have an answer for it. I just know that, yep, that's that's an issue. Yeah, you want to avoid that.
Yeah. I'm just going to note the time right now because
yes.
we are coming up to the top of the hour, and it's been a great conversation. There is one question that I think would be good to go out on, and then I'm going to quickly go over the application process for those of you who are interested in finding out a little bit more about that. But one of the questions, and I think it's a good one because it kind of exemplifies our model, is from Jordan about the transition from academic to real world application and what that looks like in this particular specialization. So you know, I know inherently with all Royal Roads courses, there's an opportunity to do a project that you do have the option. I don't think everybody always takes the option to actually implement it in some meaningful way, but either maybe you guys can speak about what you imagine that to look like, or maybe how you've seen it kind of take place in other, because I know in the MATM, there's been so many examples of people doing projects that they've had amazing impact with. So maybe you could even talk about like Kathy McRae or somebody who's done something and how that's kind of relevant.
Yep. And I guess I'll jump in on this one then. One of the things that's quite nice about the MATM program is the fact that when it comes down to doing your thesis or your major research project, after you've learned all of those, fantastic ideas from Lee, and I imagine even you might find some of the people, Lee, that are even trying out some of your ideas where you're working on that sort of business product or that business idea.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That social enterprise course is very practical. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when it comes down to your completion options of doing your major research project or your thesis, some students have actually taken those as an opportunity to research business ideas, to make a difference in other aspects. So for example, Alana mentioned Kathy McRae, who did her major research project on looking at the bear regulations in British Columbia, which actually led to a change in legislation in the province of British Columbia as far as bear hunting and bear viewing and that sort of thing. And there's lots of other opportunities or lots of other examples of students taking that final project and actually turning it into, whether it's an enterprise or a consulting career. Another person that I know took his mountain biking research that he did for his major research project and has been consulting with different mountain biking tours and groups and communities regarding mountain biking. So there's always lots of opportunities, and the nice thing is that in our program, most, if not all, of the people that you end up dealing with have that sort of practical side, have that real world element to their background beyond just a purely academic aspect. So for example, Lee was talking about, businesses that he's run himself. So he can tell you, right from himself what things he's done. I used to work for the Canadian Tourism Commission and Parks Canada doing research and marketing. So I can tell you what it's like to do that for a real world position. So in all of our programs, in all of our courses and that sort of thing, all of our instructors, one of the reasons why we get them to teach the courses is because they do that sort of combination of the theoretical and then preparing students to do the practical. Plus there's enough freedom within the projects that people do to actually apply some of the theories and ideas and work in real world situations. So hopefully that answers the question. And then over to you, Alana.
Yeah, great, thanks. I know there's a few questions here that haven't gotten answered, but if you want to follow up, you can totally get in touch with me. I know I've sent you all reminder emails, and I can connect you with Lee or Eugene to kind of further discuss if you're feeling like you want a little bit more information. But I am going to bring up the PowerPoint again and just quickly go through the application process just to familiarize again. And let me just find our slide here. All right. So in terms of how to apply. So if you're not, I know there's a few of you who have already applied for the program, but for those of you who are still considering it, standard admissions, we're looking for a 4-year degree, and then we are also looking for a minimum of 2 years work experience within the tourism and hospitality industry. If you have if you're not sure if you actually have this, have a conversation with one of our enrollment advisors. I'll be bringing up a slide for a second, because often there's more experience there than you actually give yourself credit for. So do consider that. In terms of the GPA, we are looking for a B, but if you do have a degree but you don't meet the GPA requirement, you can be let in under flexible admissions, but you may be required to do the academic writing and critical thinking course, which is a non-credit course that you would do before as like a prep. It's really helpful if you've been outside of academia for a long time, because of course, like, oh, somebody's okay, I'll keep going. If everyone could mute, that would be really helpful. So for flexible admissions, this is where we assess you holistically. So for people who have no academic background, but they have extensive professional background, we'll be looking for at least 7 years of progressive work experience with some leadership as well. In these cases, we're going to be looking at everything that you've done. This is a really amazing professional pathway that we have into our programs, and they bring a really important perspective. So you might be somebody who's doesn't have a full undergraduate degree, or maybe you've been working for a number of years and you feel like you're ready to take on a master's program. This might be great for you, but you also might know somebody who this would be really wonderful to tell about, because this is something that is quite unique that we offer. And again, because we're a professional university, we recognize that people learn in a variety of different ways, including on the job. In terms of actually applying, there is a $126.28, very specific number, fee for our application. And once you pay that, you can start submitting your documents. So official transcripts need to come to us sealed, and then you can submit your official CV. Maybe not official isn't the right, because it wouldn't be your regular CV. This is going to be a CV that's going to be like a multi-page document. You can detail all of your work experience, education experience, anything that you've led in terms of projects, anything you think is going to be relevant. Specifically, if you're coming in under flexible admissions, you really want to put some effort into this, because you really want to be making a case here on why you should be let in to the program without an undergraduate degree. And then the personal statement. So that's something that you'll see on the you'll see there's some details on that on the website under the application process. And basically that's just a statement that details why you want to come into the program, what you're hoping to get out of it. And this is something that the program heads do read, so do put some effort in behind it. It will also demonstrate your writing abilities as well. There may be a writing sample, but they're also, that's dependent. That's not something that's necessarily, that actually might be for another program. Eugene, do you guys generally request a writing sample to come into this program?
No.
No. Okay,
No.
so scratch that.
Yeah, the writing sample would just be basically that personal statement that gives us an idea of that writing sample. So.
Yes, thank you for clarifying. As soon as I read it, I was like, actually not for this program. And then 2 letters of reference. So this, in a perfect world, would be 1 academic and 1 professional. But if you've been outside of academia for quite a while, we will accept 2 professional letters of reference. They just need to come through a professional letterhead or professional email. And for the next intake, we do have an on-campus. Hopefully we will be on campus then, otherwise it will be delivered online, which, as I've mentioned, we do quite well, having done it for 25 years. So that is going to start on April the 10th of 2021, and the application deadline is currently February 19th. So a little bit of time, but do know that we do rolling admissions. So the sooner you apply, the sooner you'll find out. Generally, it takes about 8 weeks to find out if you've been admitted into the program, and then you can start planning for that. So keeping that in mind. And then for the blended program, so the blended is mostly online with short-term residencies on campus, again, once we're back on campus, and that should be starting September of next year, and the current application deadline is June the 6th. And financial aid, so if you're wondering, you have questions about financial aid, please do get in touch with them. I have a number here, both toll-free and local. We also have
I have a question from Eugene.
Oh, just hold on 1 sec. We'll hold it just till I get to the end, and then we can wrap it up.
Sure.
And then with that, you can also find out about bursaries, tuition schedules, that sort of thing. And then the enrollment services. So Now has been putting some great links in the chat box. So you can reach out to her directly from the international team. You can also get in touch with her domestic team here. And with that, I think that wraps it up. So I'm actually going to stop recording, but then we can stay on just for a minute longer and answer that question that came up. So just give me 1 moment.